The 2026 collapse isn't waiting until 2026. Right now, as you're watching this, 3 of the 5 warning signs I'm about to show you are already visible in major U.S. cities. When Silicon Valley Bank failed in March 2023, analysts said it was isolated. When First Republic collapsed 2 months later, they said the crisis was contained. When Signature Bank went down, they said the system was stable. They were wrong every single time. The pattern repeats throughout history. Experts declare stability right up until the moment everything breaks. In 2008, Ben Bernanke testified to Congress in March that subprime mortgages were contained and wouldn't affect the broader economy. 6 months later, Lehman Brothers collapsed and took the global financial system with it. In 1929, leading economists declared the market fundamentally sound days before the crash that triggered the Great Depression. And if you're waiting for experts to tell you when to prepare, you'll be months behind the people who are watching the right indicators. By the time they admit there's a crisis, the preparations you need to make will be impossible to complete. Here are the 5 warning signs that the collapse started early. Because the timeline everyone's betting on just accelerated, and most people won't realize it until it's too late. If you're seeing these patterns in your area and want to know what's actually happening behind the headlines, hit subscribe now. I break down the warning signs they don't want you recognizing, the indicators that show you're already in the crisis, not preparing for one that's coming. Warning sign number 5, regional bank failures accelerating beyond containable pace. You're not watching for one bank failure. You're watching for 3 or more regional banks failing within 90 days of each other. That's the pattern that signals systematic breakdown, not isolated incidents, and we're already seeing it. Here's why this matters. Regional banks hold 70% of all commercial real estate loans in America. When they fail, those loans don't get refinanced. They get liquidated. The $1.8 trillion in commercial loans maturing through 2026 depends on healthy regional banks willing to extend credit. When regional banks start failing in clusters, that refinancing pipeline shuts down completely. The mechanism is straightforward. Commercial real estate values dropped 30 to 50% since 2019. Banks that lent against 2019 valuations are holding loans worth more than the underlying properties. When those loans mature and can't be refinanced, the properties get foreclosed. Banks take losses, depositors panic, more banks fail. The cycle accelerates. Since March 2023, we've seen First Republic, Silicon Valley Bank, and Signature Bank collapse within weeks of each other. That's 3 major failures in 90 days. The FDIC took over all 3. Combined assets exceeded $500 billion. This isn't small bank instability. This is systematic failure of the regional banking system that holds commercial real estate together. What to watch for in your area? Local news reporting bank branches closing permanently, not temporarily. FDIC signs appearing on bank buildings. Regional banks limiting withdrawal amounts or implementing waiting periods for large transactions. Banks refusing to refinance commercial properties, even for creditworthy borrowers. Here's what this means for timeline. The 2026 commercial real estate crisis was supposed to hit when loans matured and couldn't be refinanced. But if the banks that would refinance those loans are already failing in 2024 and 2025, the crisis arrives 2 years early. Property owners who plan to refinance in 2026 discover there's nobody left to lend to them. The mathematics are brutal. Each failed regional bank held tens of billions in commercial loans. When the FDIC takes over, they liquidate those loans. That means selling commercial properties into a market with no buyers at prices that trigger more bank failures. One failure creates conditions for the next failure. The dominoes are already falling. Warning sign number 4, CBDC pilot programs transition from testing to national deployment. You're watching for the Federal Reserve announcing nationwide digital dollar testing in multiple major cities simultaneously, not limited pilots. When central banks move from experimentation to deployment, it's because they need immediate control over money flow. Here's why this matters. Central bank digital currencies give governments direct visibility into every transaction you make and direct control over how you spend. They don't deploy this infrastructure for convenience. They deploy it when they need capital controls and can't wait for gradual adoption. The mechanism is control. With physical cash, you can move money, buy assets, and store value outside the banking system. With CBDCs, every dollar you hold is programmable. It can expire if you don't spend it. It can be restricted to certain purchases. It can be turned off entirely if they decide you're using it wrong. This isn't speculation. It's how CBDCs are designed to function. China's digital yuan crossed $986 billion in transactions. That's not a pilot program. That's infrastructure deployment. India's e-rupee jumped 334% in 1 year. The European Central Bank openly discusses advancing a global euro moment to strengthen currency control. These aren't slow rollouts. These are aggressive implementations happening right now. What to watch for in your area. Federal Reserve announcements about digital dollar testing expanding beyond current limited pilots. Major banks promoting digital wallet features heavily. Government officials discussing the benefits of programmable money or fighting tax evasion through transaction tracking. Media stories about the convenience of cashless society. Here's what this means for timeline. Capital controls typically arrive 18 to 24 months after economic crisis begins, but when CBDCs move to national deployment before the crisis hits mainstream awareness, they're preparing controls for implementation within 6 to 12 months. They're building the infrastructure while people are still comfortable, so it's operational when panic starts. The pattern across every currency crisis is identical. Governments announce capital controls after people start moving money out of the country. By then, the damage is done. Smart governments deploy control infrastructure before crisis hits public awareness. That's what CBDC deployment signals. They're not preparing for some distant future. They're preparing for imminent need. Warning sign number 3, office buildings in major cities selling at 50% or more below 2019 valuations. You're watching for major metropolitan office towers selling at massive discounts and distressed sales, not normal market transactions. When institutional buyers who always bought commercial real estate won't touch properties at any price, the credit. Crisis goes mainstream. Here's why this matters. Commercial real estate has been the safe institutional investment for 50 years. Insurance companies, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds buy office buildings because they're supposed to be stable, income-generating assets. When these institutions start refusing to buy at any price, they're signaling that the entire asset class is broken. The mechanism is vacancy. San Francisco office vacancy hit 36.7% at the end of 2024. That's more than 1/3 of all office space sitting completely empty. Boston hit 20.3% and climbing. Seattle and Austin both exceeded 27%. When vacancy runs this high, rental income doesn't cover operating costs, buildings lose money every month, and loans that were underwritten assuming 90% occupancy can't be serviced when occupancy hits 60%. Here's the cascade. Building sells at 50% discount. That sale becomes the new comparable price for similar buildings. Banks holding loans on those similar buildings now have loans worth more than the properties. Those banks have to mark down asset values. When they mark down assets, capital ratios fall. When capital ratios fall below requirements, banks either raise capital or fail. And we're back to warning sign number 5. What to watch for in your area. Local news reporting office buildings selling for half their previous value. Buildings sitting on the market for months with no buyers. Owners walking away from properties rather than continuing to cover losses. Property tax assessments being challenged and reduced by 30% or more. Here's what this means for timeline. Property tax revenues fund municipal budgets. When commercial property values drop 50%, property tax revenues drop proportionally. Cities' planned budgets, assuming 2019 property values would hold, those budgets are breaking right now in 2024 and 2025, not 2026. That means police layoffs, fire department cuts, infrastructure maintenance deferred, and municipal bond downgrades. Starting immediately. The municipal crisis wasn't supposed to hit until 2026 when loan maturities forced commercial real estate revaluation. But sales happening now at 50% discounts mean the revaluation already happened. Cities are already losing revenue. The crisis is here. Warning sign number 2. Major corporations announcing permanent remote work policies and canceling long-term office leases. You're watching for Fortune 500 companies publicly abandoning prime real estate in major cities permanently, not temporary work-from-home extensions. When Amazon, Microsoft, and Google give up their flagship offices, they're signaling that the economic restructuring is permanent, and they're positioning ahead of the crash. Here's why this matters. These companies have massive real estate departments that analyze markets constantly. They don't give up prime office space because they feel like it. They give it up because their analysis shows that returning to pre-2020 office use won't happen, and continuing to pay for unused space destroys shareholder value. When they move, they're signaling what their data is showing. The mechanism is simple. Office space costs $50 to $80 per square foot annually in major cities. A company with 1 million square feet pays $50 to $80 million per year in occupancy costs. If employees work remotely permanently, that's $50 to $80 million in annual savings. When executives choose those savings over urban presence, they're telling you the urban office model is dead. What to watch for in your area. Major tech companies announcing lease terminations or choosing not to renew when leases expire. Companies subleasing large amounts of office space they previously occupied. Corporate headquarters relocating from expensive urban cores to suburban or secondary markets. Press releases framing remote work as permanent policy, not pandemic response. Here's what this means for timeline. When corporations with the best data and analysis teams abandon urban commercial real estate ahead of lease expiration, they're acting on information that says the crisis accelerates. They're not waiting until 2026 to restructure. They're restructuring now, which means they expect the commercial real estate market to be worse in 2026, not better. Their behavior is a leading indicator showing the collapse timeline moved up. The downstream effect is catastrophic. When anchor tenants leave, smaller tenants lose the foot traffic and ecosystem that made the location valuable. More tenants leave. Buildings empty faster. Values fall harder. The doom loop accelerates, and it's already spinning in San Francisco, Seattle, Boston, and other major cities. Warning sign number 1. Grocery store supply chain disruptions lasting 3 or more days become weekly occurrences instead of rare events. You're watching for empty shelves that stay empty for days, not stockouts that get resolved overnight. When food distribution breaks down persistently, you're seeing the physical economy failing faster than the financial timeline predicted. Here's why this matters. Food distribution is the most resilient supply chain in the economy. It's designed to handle weather disruptions, transportation issues, and demand spikes. When it starts breaking down regularly, it means the underlying systems, transportation, warehouse labor, trucking capacity, fuel availability, are failing. And those systems breaking means the crisis hit the real economy, not just financial markets. The mechanism is interconnected failure. Trucking companies can't find drivers because wages don't keep up with inflation. Warehouse workers quit because conditions deteriorate and pay is inadequate. Fuel prices spike because refining capacity is constrained. Retailers can't maintain inventory because wholesale prices jumped, but they can't raise consumer prices fast enough without losing customers. Each piece of the system is stressed, and when one breaks, the whole thing seizes. What to watch for in your area? Grocery stores with multiple empty sections lasting more than 2 days. Staple items, bread, milk, eggs being unavailable repeatedly, stores implementing purchase limits on basic goods, delivery times for online grocery orders extending from 2 days to 5 or 7 days, store employees unable to explain when items will be restocked. Here's what this means for timeline. Financial crisis typically hits before food supply crisis. The pattern is stock market crash, then credit freeze, then supply chain breakdown, then food shortages. When food distribution problems emerge before the financial crisis goes mainstream, it means the physical economy is deteriorating faster than the financial indicators show. You're seeing late-stage collapse symptoms while financial markets still look relatively stable. The historical parallel is Argentina. In 2001, financial crisis hit first. Banks froze deposits, currency collapsed, but grocery stores stayed, mostly stocked for another 6 months. When American grocery stores show persistent supply problems in 2024 and 2025, before the financial crisis peaks, it indicates the timeline compressed. The entire sequence is happening faster. Why early warning signs matter more than the mainstream timeline. Most people prepare based on predicted dates. They see 2026 on the timeline and think they have until 2026 to get ready. But collapses don't follow schedules. They follow sequences. When the sequence accelerates, the timeline collapses. Here's what you need to understand. Warning signs don't show up politely one at a time with space in between. They cluster, they reinforce each other. When you see 3 of these 5 signs simultaneously in your area, you're not watching early indicators of a future crisis. You're in the crisis. The difference is that most people haven't recognized it yet. The 2008 financial crisis official timeline says it started in September when Lehman Brothers collapsed. But people who were watching the right indicators saw the crisis 18 months earlier. Bear Stearns hedge funds failed in July 2007. Countrywide Financial nearly collapsed in August 2007. Northern Rock had a bank run in September 2007. The crisis was already happening. Most people just weren't watching. The same pattern played out in every major collapse. The dot-com crash of 2000 had warning signs throughout 1999. The savings and loan crisis of the 1980s showed cracks 2 years before it went mainstream. The Great Depression had regional bank failures and agricultural collapse in 1928, a full year before the stock market crash that everyone remembers. Here's the advantage of recognizing warning signs early. When you see the crisis 6 months before mainstream acknowledgement, you have time to prepare without competing with panic. Banks still have cash. Grocery stores are still stocked. Prices haven't spiked. You can move methodically instead of desperately. This time is following the same pattern. The indicators are flashing. Regional banks are failing. CBDCs are deploying. Commercial real estate is selling at crash prices. Corporations are abandoning offices. Supply chains are breaking. The crisis is here. The question is whether you recognize it before everyone else figures it out. You have a decision to make right now. You can wait for mainstream media to declare the crisis official. By then, banks will have withdrawal limits. Grocery stores will have empty shelves, and the preparations you should have made will be impossible to complete. Or you can trust the indicators that are already visible and act while there's still time. The people who survived 2008 with minimal damage weren't those who predicted the exact date. They were those who recognized the warning signs early and positioned defensively before panic hit. The people who will survive 2026 or 2025 or whenever the mainstream admits this is a crisis are those acting on what they're seeing right now. If you're seeing 3 out of 5 of these warning signs in your area, the 2026 collapse isn't coming in 2026. It's happening now. And the window to prepare is measured in weeks and months, not years. Subscribe because next week I'm revealing the specific actions to take when you spot these warning signs in your area, including the 48-hour survival window. Most people will miss completely the exact sequence of preparation that matters, and the 3 things you must do before grocery store runs become the norm. See you then.